This video is brought to you by Incogni. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they are providing to the entire upper echelon community. Okay, let me just dive right into the deep end. Elon Musk is a liar. Sadly, the modern definition of lies often feels like a rapidly moving goalpost, people desperately endeavoring to handwave away or explain the lies of their political heroes and their idols. But today I want to use inescapable data to illustrate the point that Tesla robotaxis are an actual safety hazard that should be immediately barred completely from operating on public roads. I want to try and make this as objective as possible, so instead of beginning with all of the anecdotes, of which there are plenty, by the way, I want to start with the statements of Tesla itself, which in no uncertain terms claims that supervised full self-driving, which is precisely what they've now demoed as a ride-hailing service in Austin, Texas, is 7 times safer when it comes to major or minor collisions when compared to a human driver. That is an outlandish claim, but it's not the only one. According to Tesla, when it comes to minor collisions, supervised full self-driving will go an average of 1.5 million miles before a collision happens, whereas a human driver only goes about 230,000. That's where the 7x figure roughly comes from, by the way. If a human gets in a minor crash every 200,000 miles or so, but Tesla Autopilot can go 1.5 million, that would make it loosely, generously, 7 times safer. And I want everyone to keep these numbers in the back of their mind later in the video, because at the end of it all, I want to voice my opinion that this is criminal fraud. First things first, I did a prior video about 5 months ago called The Failing Gambit of Tesla. Excellent watch, I'll link it down below. But in that video, I put together a montage of 15 separate times over the span of 10 years where Elon Musk says that full self-driving autonomy, specifically where you do not need a human supervisor at all, is just 1 year away. That's not exaggeration, okay? It's a lie. Exaggeration is when you claim to catch a 15-pound bass, for example, and it's really just 9 pounds. At least you caught an actual bass in that circumstance. But a lie is when you say, I just caught a live shark, and it was really just a piece of seaweed. One of them is plausibly true, even if deliberately inflated. But the other is a fully cognizant lie, because no version of reality and no possible mistake or misunderstanding can ever compensate for how egregiously wrong you are and how brutally obvious that deception is to the rest of the world. That is Elon Musk to the very letter. From full self-driving to world record-setting video game accomplishments, he is a liar, whose company is now making a safety claim that is so unbelievably fake, it boggles the mind. And yet these lies routinely serve as a sort of foundation for the underlying value of Tesla stock, which is itself the foundation behind the status of Elon Musk as world's richest man. All in all, it's a house of cards, and it will, someday, come crashing down around him. Let's get to the data. Quick overview before the actual numbers. Tesla is trying to make robotaxis, obviously, and over the second half of 2025, they rolled out the first version of those robotaxis in Austin, Texas. Thankfully, because of a 2021 standing order by the NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, when a collision occurs, be it minor or major, companies like Tesla or its competitors like Waymo or Zoox, companies operating autonomous vehicles, have to file a crash report. It looks like this, sort of. Some of the fields are different depending on what kind of report they're filing, but the goal is to have, quote, robust oversight over potential safety defects in vehicles operating with ADS and Level 2 ADAS, end quote. So far, so good. But when you're a company like Tesla, making insane safety claims about how your vehicles are 7 times safer than an average driver, the existence of these reporting frameworks become a problem for you, which is why as of August 2025, there's a new federal probe into Tesla for, quote, repeatedly failing to quickly disclose crashes involving its driver assistance and self-driving systems, end quote. Even still, despite this new federal probe into the company because they're trying to avoid the reporting process, they haven't been able to get away from it entirely, so we do in fact have access to about 6 months of data showcasing, without beating around the bush any further, that Tesla robotaxis are nearly 50 times less safe than what they claim, and those metrics appear true, in spite of the fact that there's a human driver in the car with a kill switch trying to make sure it doesn't crash. Let me just reiterate that for the Elon fans out there. Even with a human safety expert in the car whose only job is to stop the car from getting into a collision, robotaxis are almost 50 times more prone to collision accidents compared to what Tesla claims to its investors, shareholders, and fans. At a certain point, it's not exaggeration anymore, it's lies. Going on a bit of a tangent, pretty much every single major technology company is now a data company, and your personal information is the product. Incogni, today's video sponsor, is here to help with that because cutting back on the number of places where your data is stored, sold, and displayed, which can result in all sorts of problems like scams, theft of identity, harassment, data breaches, etc., is never a bad thing. It is only ever a positive thing. Pretty simple process. Sign up for the website, give them legal permission to work on your behalf, and then let them know what they'll be having removed. After that, they contact data brokers, of which there are hundreds, and they do it. Additionally, a core aspect of the service now is the ability to submit takedown requests for yourself. Everyone's probably Googled their name before and found their information on a website where it shouldn't be, but when that happens, you can now submit the URL to Incogni, and they'll attempt to get the info taken down for you. Doing this on your own is certainly possible, but contacting the legal departments for that many companies and fighting through an extremely protracted and tedious process, it's also time intensive, is almost impossible. Incogni now offers you the option of finding where your information is displayed and then submitting the link to them, after which they execute that process with all of their streamlined resources to force the results, which means less ability for the people that you don't want finding you to actually go and find you. Using the link down below in the description and code Echelon at checkout, you can get 60% off an annual subscription to Incogni. Again, link down below and promo code Echelon at checkout for 60% off your subscription. Big thank you to Incogni for continuing to sponsor the channel. Back on task. And now for the actual proof of the situation. This is what the data in totality looks like after being compiled by the NHTSA into a spreadsheet. I've truncated some of the empty columns for the sake of space, but the key things that we get to see are company, obviously, date, location, and something called narrative, as in a description of what actually happened. The colors may seem strange, but let me explain that too. Anything in gray isn't relevant for today because it's either A, outside the window of time where I had the necessary comparable stats from the companies involved to do a proper analysis, or B, because it's just not relevant. Wrong city, wrong company, etc., etc. Anything blue, or bright green as well, is a crash reported by Waymo, and anything bright yellow is a collision reported by Tesla. All of these highlighted reports are from Austin, Texas, and all of them take place between June and November of 2025. Now for something extremely critical. We don't know how many of these incidents overall are the direct responsibility of the software itself, but we should know that. When these companies make a report, they're supposed to submit what's called narrative, which is a description of what actually happened. As an example, here's an incident report from Waymo, line 34, where a bus literally just backed up into it. The Waymo car was completely stationary at the time. It's a collision, sure, but it's not really the fault of the software, is it? Here's another one, line 62, where the Waymo was going through a green light and an SUV making an unprotected turn swerved right into it. If you took most of these cases to an insurance agency, for example, it would be an extremely simple outcome. The other driver was at fault. However, Tesla is the only company that refuses to submit a description of what happened. They redact all of those narrative sections and deliberately never clarify who is at fault. I see no other possible explanation for this except that Tesla is at fault, because that's not even the only thing that they refuse to say. In these reports, you can also see that Tesla says things like, quote, other, see narrative, under certain sections, even though they damn well know that they also redacted the narrative, which means that Tesla is quite literally the only company selectively choosing what to put in and what to leave out on these forms, thereby deliberately rendering them incomplete. Every other company does it properly. Even still, let's be as generous as possible, as favorable as it can possibly get on the side of Tesla, and let's assume that all of these reports from every single company, every single time, are the fault of the car. Then what? Then we have to do math. From June to November of 2025, comparing Tesla to Waymo, and to itself, because let's not forget these incredible claims on the Tesla website, and let's also not forget that they explicitly say, quote, your likelihood of being in a collision goes down, not your likelihood of causing one, your likelihood of simply being in one, which is why I would speculate that Tesla is withholding narrative submissions because they're causing the collisions. But if you only go by the numbers and their own precise corporate claims, Tesla has had 8 collisions from June to November during their pilot program in Austin. Comparatively, Waymo has actually had 35. And even if we know from descriptions they give that half of those collisions were shit like a deep pothole in the road, where the undercarriage of the car made contact with the pavement and then tripped the system, even if we know that because they fill out the forms correctly, let's assume all of them are minor collisions by fault of the vehicle. Now what? Now we need time frame and we need scale. June to November, Waymo and Tesla. For Tesla, that's actually very easy. We have an earnings call transcript where they openly state that during the comparable timeframe, robotaxis in the pilot program drove 0.25 million miles, as in 250,000. But for Waymo, it gets a little bit harder. We know that Waymo launched in Austin early March, and we also know that they expanded their operations heavily in July. We also have stats in total indicating that they've traveled 6.337 million miles in their Austin program. So, once again, being as generous as possible in favor of Tesla, let's overshoot dramatically and subtract March, April, May, and December all as if they were equal portions of the total. We're talking about roughly 10 months of data, 4 months taken away, therefore 60% of the 6.33 million. 6.337 million actually, aka in the end 3.8 million, which is a dramatic undervaluation because they massively expanded their operations in July. March, April, and May are likely far smaller. Still, who cares? We're Tesla fanboys over here, so let's assume everything is Waymo's fault and that they only had 3.8 million miles in the same time frame. Now what? Now we have to do the actual comparison because 8 collisions in 250,000 miles for Tesla comes out to 1 collision per 31,000 miles, and 35 collisions for Waymo, compared against their 3.8 million total, is over 108,000. By the metrics that we have, the actual data submitted by these companies being as forgiving as possible to Tesla, while also understanding that Tesla has a human safety operator in the car at all times, specifically to prevent accidents, which Waymo doesn't have, in a comparable time frame, Waymo is well over 3 times as unlikely to have any sort of collisions. But wait, because that's not what actually matters in the slightest. What matters is Tesla's own statements. I don't want to make this a comparison between one company or the other because people will come out of the woodwork and scream, "You must have investments in Waymo, you're a shill." I want this to be a comparison of one company to themselves. Lies to reality. Conman garbage and fanboy idiocy to cold hard facts. Remember, according to them, their vehicles, when supervised, have 7 times fewer minor collisions compared to human drivers, while human drivers go an average of 229,000 miles before a minor incident. Let's run those stats again, all right? Tesla has something like 29 robotaxis operating in Austin as per this time frame, achieving 250,000 miles in total as per their own statements to investors, and they've had 8 separate minor collisions, which they refuse to describe at all, despite safety officers being there in the vehicle at all times, which means 31,250 miles on average per accident. That makes Tesla 8 times less safe compared to the US average that they have on their own website, and 48 times less safe compared to what they themselves claim. And the kicker is that even with a person sitting there with a kill switch pointedly trained to stop the car from having collisions, this shit is still 8 times worse than their own supposed human average. Make no mistake, this doesn't make full self-driving 7 times safer than a human. It makes full self-driving 8 times worse than a human, despite a human who's only there to try and stop the mistakes. Like, it's 8 times worse while thwarting a human who's trying to make it better. That's insane. What do we think the ratio is going to be when they take that human out of the car? Because if it's 8 times worse now and 48 times worse in total, compared to what they're saying at the moment, where do we think that number goes when the human backstop, who isn't even capable of making the shit technology perform even remotely as safe as a normal human to begin with, gets taken out of the equation? And before people say, "Oh, well, they're not going to do that till it's ready." No. They're literally testing it right now. I don't want to rehash everything, so let me just end with this. Maybe the technology gets there someday. Maybe all the Teslas become super convenient automated taxis with 0 crashes and perfect safety, but that's not what they are right now. What they are right now is a massively unsafe addition to the roads, far worse than average people, while the company responsible for making and selling them is just openly lying to the world. The stats that Tesla is giving aren't just fabricated, they're flatly insane. And at the very same time, they're purposefully circumventing the safety protocols and the reporting process that the NHTSA implemented to stop rapidly developing autonomous vehicles from endangering public people, public roads, or everyday citizens. At the very least, after watching this video, I don't care who you are, everyone should be able to agree that unless they start filing collision reports properly, right, put all the information in there, Instead of delaying and hiding what actually happened, unless they can do that very basic minimum, they should be completely barred from operation. Heavy sanctions rip them off the roads and disallow them from doing any more public testing. But even if they do stop hiding, let's say they start actually telling the truth and abiding by the safety laws, unless they stop lying to the public about their shit-ass cars being 50 times safer than they actually are, they should be full-scale shut down as a corporate fraud. That's what we used to do when a company said, our thing is super safe, and then it was actually super fucking dangerous. We used to call that corporate fraud, and we used to prosecute people like that and lock them up. But nowadays, apparently, crime is legal. That's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. The video sponsor, of course, locals and Patreon, channel memberships, a special VPN deal, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.